views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Oh my God. I was like,
and
what?
welcome to Bronx Talk. We have a group of Bronx elected officials who are with us this evening. This is really a very special night. We're doing it all virtually because everybody sees the importance of staying safe. I'm proud to say this is the 26th anniversary of Bronx Talk. We've done more than 1,260 programs in our 26 years. And this evening, we were asked by the new chairman of the Bronx Democratic County Committee that, hey, why don't we celebrate the largest voting bloc, if you will, the largest ethnic group in the Bronx, and that is Hispanics, a way of celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month. And so without further ado, on the last night of Hispanic Heritage Month, as a matter of fact, it is my pleasure to welcome the new chair of the Bronx Democrats, Senator Jamaal Bailey. Senator, nice to have you with us. Why did you think this was an important thing to do tonight?
Well, Gary, first and foremost, congratulations on 26 years of great work on behalf of the borough of the Bronx for BronxNet. And secondly, you mentioned, why am I doing this? You talked about the majority voting bloc. Well, the majority of my household is of Latin descent. My wife is Puerto Rican and my children are Afro-Latinas. So if you talk about majorities in the house, my majority says that I have to do the right thing. But besides that, we have a really vibrant, it's just an incredible mix of elected officials and soon to be elected officials that we have here tonight in our districts. It's just amazing to be able to be a part of such an amazing borough, and I'm honored. But I wanted to make sure that we recognize something on a more somber note about two of the amazing Latinx leaders in our community. The late great Nilda Velasquez, who was a longtime district leader in the 87th Assembly District. She passed away recently, so we want to make sure that we send our thoughts and prayers out to her and her family. And one of our own, our district leader, Yudelka Tapia, out of the 86th Assembly District, a very strong Latina in her own right. She recently lost a son. And we want to make sure that you know that this is a Bronx family. We are on one accord, and I want to make sure that we send out our prayers out to them at this time of need, and let you know that no matter what, we are with you together as one. So I just want to make sure we made that, and we made that clear for the record. But I want to introduce each elected official. And the first one I'm going to introduce, and I'm going to introduce them, and Gary, you'll get to the questions, I believe, and then I'll get out of your way, as a good chairman would do. First gentleman I'm going to introduce, he really likes the number 15 because he's going from the 15th Council District to the 15th Congressional District, current City Council member and Congressional nominee, Richie Torres. We're excited to have you, Richie. My brother in the State Senate, he's the chair of the Crime Victims and Corrections Committee. We got to fix, we've been talking about fixing that name, but we're not fixing about the commitment that you've had to immigrant rights and making sure that we do the right thing in the borough, Senator Louis Sepulveda. Assemblywoman from the 87th Assembly District. She hasn't been in the assembly that long, but she's been making her mark, making sure that she's representing on housing related issues. And also she's been really on the front lines during the pandemic. As a nurse, Assemblywoman Karina Reyes. From the 17th Councilperson District, I got to figure out how to get the nomenclature of that right. He is the chair of the Land Use Committee, a critically important committee in the City Council, and he's been feeding the Bronx, it seems, throughout the last couple of months in this pandemic. Councilmember Rafael Salamanca, assembly member from the 86th Assembly District, just jumped on, a new proud papa from the west side of the Bronx. He's a leader in the caucus in Albany, and he makes sure that we run things efficiently. And he's our new first vice chair of the Bronx Democratic County Committee, Assembly Member Victor Pichardo. And last but certainly not least, she still has Naisna on her name because she's not there just yet. She is our Democratic nominee, and we are looking forward to great things in the 84th Assembly District from Amanda Septimo. Again, I'm going to get out of your way, Gary. Thank you for doing this, Bronx, BX all day, and I'm just going to get out of your way, and so we can get the great questions going.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And I guess you can lay back and enjoy the show with the rest of us. So we're going to really, we have so many people and so little time that we're going to do another whole group in the second half of our hour-long program. So we're just going to have a little fun to start with each of you, and it'll be very similar questioning. We'll start with Councilmember Richie Torres. Congratulations on your campaign. Thank you for joining us last week. What country or territory is your family from? What are your roots?
Puerto Rico. My father's from Naguabo.
Did you ever live there, and do you go back and visit?
I've been to Puerto Rico, but I've never lived there. I've lived in the Bronx my whole life.
What do you like best about being Puerto Rican?
I'm the product of wise Latinas. Actually, when I won the congressional race, I paid tribute to my mother because I would not be here were it not for my mother. Before I was Councilman Richie Torres, before I'll be Congressman Richie Torres, I'll always be the son of Deborah Bachelet, who's the wisest Latina I know.
Among the things that are interesting, I think, and challenging for many Hispanics is language. What was the language you spoke when you were growing up in your home? And how difficult was it to be bilingual? Talk a little bit about your experience.
Oh, I'm the worst person to I'm the worst person to ask. I primarily speak English. So my father was born in Puerto Rico, but I only met my father once when I was visiting my two brothers in prison. But my mother's side of the family has been here for 3 generations. My mother and my grandmother both were born in the United States in the Bronx, and so we spoke English.
I have to tell you, you're not the worst person, because these are the issues Hispanics deal with. Some people are bilingual, some people speak English, some people speak Spanish. And so, I think it's revealing and interesting to find out who does what. Let's just talk, because we want each of the elected officials who have passion about issues. Councilmember, you've had passion about housing. How are Hispanics in the Bronx doing as regards housing?
Well, Latinos were hit the hardest by COVID-19, and we're struggling well before the outbreak of the coronavirus. But since the coronavirus, housing insecurity, economic desperation has risen to a new level. More than half the residents in the South Bronx, primarily Latino, pay more than half their income toward their rent. And that's before you factor in the cost of prescription drugs and utilities and food and transportation. So if all the stars are aligned in Washington, D.C., if the Democrats win the presidency and the Senate and retain the House, then we will have the makings of an FDR moment, and we will have a once-in-a-century opportunity to invest in the creation of affordable housing on a scale that we have not seen before.
And of course, you didn't add, if you're fortunate enough to be elected, that you will be part of that direct effort.
I mean, if I cannot win the most Democratic district in America as the Democratic nominee, I should retire from life.
Well, no, we hope that doesn't happen. Anyway, thank you so much, Councilmember. Let's stick around. We're going to try and do a lightning round before we dispense with this particular group. Let's start and say hello to Senator Louis Sepulveda. Nice to have you with us. You are one of our most frequent guests on Bronx Talk. It's always great to have you with us.
Yeah, but I think Jamaal he's got now a job for the future, right? He's introducing people looking great.
Well, we'll find
Gary.
we'll find out. We'll find out how he does, and we'll bring him on Bronx Talk, and he'll get all the tough questions that I can think of. Anyway, let's do some of the same questions for you. Where is your family from? What is your heritage?
Sure. My father was born in one of the largest towns of Southwest Puerto Rico called Mayagüez, Puerto Rico. My mother was born in Guanica, Puerto Rico. But I also have some indirect roots with the Dominican community because my wife is Dominican. So my youngest child is half Dominican and half Puerto Rican.
I think this tells tremendous stories, and there are things that each of you are going to say that I think a lot of people can relate to. So did you ever live in Puerto Rico, and how often do you visit?
I lived there a total of about 7 years. I visit almost once a year at a minimum. And I've lived there, and I went to school there on a couple of occasions, including as an unmatriculated student at one of the engineering colleges that produces many engineers in Nassau. I wasn't an engineer, but to stay fresh, I took some courses there.
And what do you like best about Puerto Rico or being Puerto Rican?
Well, I mean, my Puerto Rican identity essentially defines who I am to a lot of degrees. I mean, we all have experiences that are similar. For example, one of the first languages that I learned was Spanish because of the Spanish soap operas, the telenovelas, which everybody's grandmother watched. So that was a great way for me to learn the language, and I was fortunate enough to live there. But you also, being Puerto Rican gives me a big sense of pride because there've been a lot of Puerto Rican famous figures that people don't know about that were ahead of their time, and you don't hear about their mentions. So my grandfather, who was characterized as a Black Puerto Rican, he was a dark-skinned Puerto Rican man who suffered a lot of the indignities that other African Americans suffered. He was a very bright man, and he taught me a lot about famous political figures in Puerto Rico. So for many people who are not Puerto Rican, they don't know about a guy named Pedro Albiso Campos. Pedro Albiso Campos was a revolutionary. He graduated from Harvard Law School. He spoke 8 languages fluently. The government offered him jobs, but because of the treatment he received as a soldier during the Second World War, he became very resentful of the American government and started the national movement. Ultimately, he was incarcerated. They used him to cancer treatments. But this is a figure that if you're Puerto Rican, everybody knows about. There were a lot of Puerto Rican women that were certainly ahead of their time during many years. For example, there's a woman named Lola Rodriguez. She fought for women's rights in Puerto Rico long before the women's rights movement here in the United States. And she was a major abolitionist in Puerto Rico. And 2 more people I want to mention because I wish that the children, especially Latino and Puerto Rican children in the city, would know about these people. One guy was Ramon Emiterio Betances, who's the father of the independence movement in Puerto Rico. But he was, again, gave his life because of the indignities that they felt they were feeling at the hands of the United States. And one more that's very important, even though we have different opinions in terms of the political status of Puerto Rico, a guy named Jose Cesar Barbosa, who was the first person of African descent to get a medical license here in the United States. So that, when my grandfather taught me about these people, it filled me with a sense of pride and a sense of wanting to be involved in government and in movements. Then you have our culture, you have our food. I mean, it's all of who I am.
Senator, we've got to cut you off because you have colleagues who also need to get some time. Stick around. We'll try to hit you with some lightning rod questions in just a little bit. Let's say hello to the Assembly member in the 87th Assembly District. It is Assembly Member Carinas Reyes. Nice to have you with us.
Hi, Gary.
So let's talk about you and your heritage. Where are you from?
I was born in the Dominican Republic. My mother's Dominican, my father's Puerto Rican. I actually lived in Puerto Rico for some time before I immigrated to New York when I was 6 years old.
And how often do you visit either Puerto Rico or the Dominican Republic?
Every year. I try to go multiple times a year, but at least once a year, I still have family there that expect me to show up.
The language that you spoke at home as you were growing up, and are you bilingual, and was that a difficult process for you?
Yeah, my first language was Spanish. I learned English when I came to this country. Actually, I remember learning English with my mother. We would sit down and kind of work through it together. But my first language is Spanish.
I want to thank you, and I know all of the Bronx and all of America thanks you for your work during the pandemic. You took off your assembly robes and put on your gown and went back to work. How are Hispanics doing as regards the pandemic right now?
Well, we saw the numbers, and the Latino community and the Black community, the African American community was disproportionately affected by COVID. We have large groups in the Latino community that are undocumented and therefore uninsured or underinsured, and of course we have a lot of comorbidities that predispose us to having poor outcomes from COVID. And we saw those numbers when we saw the rate of infection and the rate of death, particularly in the Bronx. But I think moving forward, we need to address all the social determinants of health, housing, healthcare access, education, access to food, all these issues that, of course, contribute to how well we do in terms of our health outcomes.
And I guess you will agree with me, wear your mask, stay socially distant, period.
Absolutely. And wash your hands.
And
At least 20 seconds long, for at least 20 seconds, yes.
I do. I have a song that I sing and it lasts 20 seconds, so I know that I get it for 20 seconds. Thank you so much.
One thing that people don't know, the rule is you're supposed to sanitize twice. Once you've sanitized your hands twice, you should actually wash your hands with soap and water. You can't be sanitizing your hands all day long and not washing.
Harry, spoken like a real nurse. Look at that.
I was going to say, so says the Assembly member nurse. Let's say hello to Victor Pichardo. I did not know that you had a child. That sounds like maybe the best news that we've heard tonight. So congratulations. It's only the beginning. I've been down that road. A lot of us have been. Anyway, nice to see you, Assembly
Always a
member.
pleasure, Gary.
Your heritage is what?
Both my parents are from the Dominican Republic. I actually did most of my primary school in the Dominican Republic, and I sort of had kind of like a reverse immigration story. So I was born here in the States, and then my parents relocated us to the Dominican Republic, and my first language was English. So it took me a little bit to learn Spanish fluently enough where I can keep up with my studies to the point where I was left back a grade when I moved to the Dominican Republic in order for me to catch up with sort of basic conversational and written Spanish. And here we are.
I'd like to pursue that a little bit. I think there's many people that can relate to it. So if you spoke English, did you like naturally pick up Spanish, or did you go to an ESL class? Did you learn for your parents? Or was, I think that's a very important process for people to understand, because many, especially young people, can relate to.
Mm-hmm. Well, young kids are, at that time I was, very young, and young kids at that time are very kind of like sponges. So it was a lot of conversational Spanish at home when we were in the Dominican Republic, a lot of conversational Spanish with my peers and my classmates at that time. And the good thing is the schools that I went to, a lot of them taught English as a second language. So it was sort of kind of matching the two. So, but they're not, they have similar alphabets, but they're not linguistically similar in terms of cadence, dictation, and everything.
It is fascinating to me, and I didn't know that about you, that you had been left back as a result. Take about 30 seconds and tell me what would facilitate that process for young people, young Hispanic children in the Bronx as they go through the education system that would stop them from getting left back simply because they don't speak the language.
As boring as it sounds, just read the local newspaper, read the local media, read books in the native language. It might be difficult to pick up, but once you start sort of making comparisons and contractions, you'll sort of start picking up. And then obviously just the reinforcement of conversational language is incredibly important, and you'll pick it up, especially for the younger you are, the easier it is, and you'll pick it up much faster than when you're an adult and try to learn it that way.
Thank you so much. Let's say hello to Councilmember Rafael Salamanca in the 17th Congressional Council District in the South Bronx. Nice to have you with us, Council Member.
Gary, thank you for having me.
Let's talk about your heritage. Where does your family hail from, and what's your background?
Yeah, so both my parents are from Puerto Rico. My dad is from Isabela, and my mother is from Mayagüez. They were both born in Puerto Rico. My dad was raised there. My mom, she was brought over to the South Bronx at the age of 2 years old. And I'm a South Bronx young man, born and raised in the South Bronx.
Do you go to Puerto Rico? Have you been there? And how often do you visit?
Yeah, my family and I, my wife and I and Aiden, we go to Puerto Rico. We try to go there twice a year. We were just in Puerto Rico in February for a humanitarian trip with the earthquakes that was happening in Guanica, where we did a drive, and we went to Puerto Rico. It was devastating to see the effects of how these earthquakes really ravaged Puerto Rico, and seeing the non-response from the federal government was extremely hurtful. But that was the last time we were there. We were supposed to go in November. I think all of my colleagues are supposed to go to Puerto Rico in November. But with COVID, I don't think that trip is going to be feasible.
One of the issues that has taken hold throughout the city, and in fact, the publication, The City, had a story today about hunger in the Bronx. You know, we all know about it. I know you folks deal with it and address it every single day and think about it probably more often than not. Council member, how are we doing at getting people fed in the Bronx on just some very fundamental things, you know, milk and bread and eggs and things like that?
Gary, we saw when COVID hit how it devastated the city of New York, especially here in the borough of the Bronx, especially communities of color. You know, it put a halt on our healthcare system. Everything stopped. Focus was just on COVID. So if you had any pre-existing conditions, any appointments with your physician, you had to wait. The economy was put on hold where people were laid off or furloughed. You know, we lost family members. I lost my dad because of COVID. And I think that just like thousands of New Yorkers and Americans, one of the most devastating things in losing a family member during COVID is not being able to be with that family member during their last hours on this earth. And I really got to put my hand out to the nurses, to Karina's, because it was the nurses who took care of my dad his last hours that he was here. And then finally, Gary, you know, the food inequality. You know, the borough of the Bronx, you know, we're the most unhealthiest county. The South Bronx, we have the world's biggest food markets, but yes, we're food deserts. So what my office has done since the beginning of April, we've held food distribution drives twice a week, every Tuesday and Thursday. Not just
Councilmember, I do have to cut you off because we do want to get Amanda Sepulveda in there before we have to end the segment. Thank you so much for all the service, and I know you and all your colleagues. It's the most fundamental thing. It angers me so much, and we got to just keep fighting to make sure people get fed. Thank you so much. So now Amanda Sepulveda, the only one in the room other than me who is not an elected official. She hopes to be elected to the 84th Assembly District. Nice to see you with us, Ms. Sepulveda. Talk to me about your heritage and your roots.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Gary. It's great to be here. And I do want to just plus one all the work that Councilman Salamanca has been doing. We overlap a lot. And he really has been moving the needle on food security for people in our community. And that's really important in this time. So my mother is actually fully Dominican. My grandparents came from the Dominican Republic. And my dad is actually Black. And I, like soon to be Congressman Torres, have only kind of met him once in my life. And so I'm really connected to kind of my Dominican culture because it's the family that I grew up with. And I sort of struggled with the same kind of learning Spanish while learning English, I guess, which is a little different than some of the stories we've heard. But my mom actually had me when she was a teenager in her first year of college. And so I was living with my grandparents in the first kind of few years of my life. And that led to Spanish being sort of my first language, but growing up in the Bronx, that means you're hearing a lot of English as well. And so I've got some fun stories that I'll tell you some other time about a couple of days at school where I was confused and thinking I was speaking English, but teachers couldn't understand me. And it's a whole process.
I think this is really instructive for so many young people to say, wait a minute, I'm not alone. And listen, we have 54% of the borough of the Bronx identifies as Hispanic. And so, all the experiences we're hearing about are very, very relevant. Let's very briefly maybe take about 30 or 60 seconds to talk about economic development. How are we going to really empower Bronx people so that they can control their own destinies financially?
Sure. I mean, I think coronavirus has really given us an opportunity to reimagine how we do everything, and that includes economic development. We've really got a blank canvas in terms of deciding where to invest meaningfully. And I think that the future of meaningful economic development for the borough, for the city, for the state really lies in emerging sectors like technology, like green infrastructure, because they are easy and the responsible thing to be investing in at this point. And they also don't require traditional education backgrounds, which is something that a lot of folks in our community don't have. And so we can give people an opportunity to kind of transform their lives overnight. But I think none of that is going to happen if we can't get to sort of equitable representation. I would be remiss to mention that this is Hispanic Heritage Month, but if you look at leadership at the highest levels throughout our state, it just doesn't reflect the power and the strength and the presence of the Latino community. From the governor to the mayor and every city and statewide official in between, we don't have any Latinos present. And I think that is something that really needs to be balanced to ensure that as we move forward, there's equitable representation and thought given to all communities as we recover from coronavirus.
Thank you all for that. And this is a celebration. So let's have a little fun. Let's do some lightning round questions. Let's keep it short. We're getting a few of them. So we'll start essentially in the same order. So that means you, Councilmember Torres, favorite Latin singer or Latin musician?
I went to the same high school campus as Cardi B. Does she count?
Hey, it's all the Bronx, my friend. So yes, she certainly does. Yeah. All right, there we go. And Senator Sepulveda, for you, who's your favorite? What is your favorite Latin singer or music?
Ruben Blades, but my favorite music is jazz.
There you go. Okay, fair enough. Assemblymember Reyes, for you.
I love all Spanish music, but I'm a sucker for Juan Luis Guerra.
Assemblyman Puerto.
Well, I believe Assemblymember Reyes and I have a very similar taste in music. I was going to say Juan Luis Guerra and Anthony Santos, because that's the music that I grew up in. Hearing my mom clean the house on Saturdays, that was the only thing that she would listen to.
So there you go. So we can say thank you, Mom. Councilmember Salamanca, for you.
Yeah, it depends on my mood. So if I'm into reggaeton, I'm listening to Bad Bunny. If not, Romeo Santos with the bachata.
We didn't get to Amanda Septimo. Ms. Septimo, go ahead.
I mean, I'm Dominican, so of course I love Juan Luis Guerra like everyone else. But I think it also depends on my mood. I can't live without Aventura, but I also really love Osjua.
Okay, we're going to go around again, same order.
Mark Anthony, I want to make sure Mark Anthony is my favorite. He's my favorite. I gotta make sure I throw in there like represent my wife and my kids, but only when he sings in Spanish, because you sing to me, don't do it. But Preciosa, that's my jam. Jump into that. I'm sorry.
All right, favorite Latin food, Councilmember Torres.
Pasteles.
There you go. Fair enough. I wonder if we're going to get that answer all around the table. We'll find out. Senator Sepulveda. We didn't hear you. Got to unmute your microphone there.
Verdura.
Okay, fair enough. What I love is I'm seeing nods from the other people. Whatever. Oh yeah. There we go. All right, I lost my order here. So let's see.
Me, I'm next.
Assemblywoman Reyes, go ahead.
I love to cook, so I don't have a favorite food, but you can't be Spanish without having like really good habichuelas guisadas. So beans.
Okay, we're running out of time. Let's be quick. Assemblyman Puerto.
Tres golpes.
There you go. Somebody groaned over there. I don't know who it is. Well fed. Councilmember Salamanca.
A traditional Puerto Rican meal: arroz blanco con habichuela and chuletas with tostones.
And Amanda Septimo. We'll get to Senator Bailey as well to get the final word. So go ahead.
Very on brand. I love plátanos of all kinds. I can eat them in any form at any day for any meal.
Senator Bailey, the final word on the lightning round.
Arroz con gandule and lechon. That's my favorite Puerto Rican meal.
Senator Bailey, Assemblywoman Reyes, Senator Sepulveda, Councilmember Salamanca, Assemblyman Pichardo, Amanda Septimo, maybe you will be elected. We'll find out soon enough. And Councilmember Richard Torres, thank you so much. Folks who are watching us, guess what? It's only the first half. We got a whole other group of Bronx Hispanic officials coming up. Thank you. Congratulations on Hispanic Heritage Month. This really is absolutely the best of the Bronx tonight. So thank you so much. We'll take a short break and we'll be back with a whole other group of elected officials. Good night.
Thank you.
It's 7 o'clock.
This is an urgent message to inform you that the Trump administration has now shortened the deadline for the census to today, October 15th. Failing to respond to the census could affect billions of dollars of funding for your community. You might lose your representative in Congress due to a low count. You have until today, October 15th, to fill out the census by mail, phone, or online. Remember, the census does not ask about your citizenship. Stand up and be counted. Do it now. It's important.
And you still have until tomorrow, Friday at 6 a.m. to fill out the census online at 2020census.gov.
Listen up, Bronxites. Election Day is Tuesday, November 3rd. Are you safely hitting the polls for in-person voting? Or are you voting absentee by mailing in your ballot? New York offers absentee ballots by mail to voters who will be unable to vote in person for any reason. Absentee voting can be confusing, but it's safe and has become more common during coronavirus due to fears of crowding when voting at poll sites. In the primary elections, more than 500,000 ballots were rejected and discarded due to human error. So before you start filling in your ballot, make sure to keep the following in mind. Fill in your bubble selections with a blue or black ink pen only. Never mark any X's or check marks as opposed to filling these bubbles in. Don't forget to sign and date the back of the ballot envelope. And finally, mail your absentee ballot before the deadline, November 3rd. You can also drop it off in person at an early voting poll site between October 24th and November 1st, at a poll site on Election Day, November 3rd by 9 p.m., or at the Bronx County Board of Elections office no later than November 3rd by 9 p.m. Stay informed, stay safe, and most importantly, make sure you mail your absentee ballot or wear a mask, remain 6 feet apart, and safely head out to the polls to have your vote count and your voice heard. Este es un mensaje urgente para informarle que la administración de Trump acaba de acortar la fecha límite para el censo a hoy, el 15 de octubre. No responder al census podría afectar miles de millones de dólares en fondos para su comunidad. Usted podría perder a su representante en el Congreso debido a un conteo bajo. Tienes hasta esta noche, el 15 de octubre, para completar el censo por correo, por teléfono o en línea. Recuerde, el censo no pregunta sobre su ciudadanía. Es importante que se ponga de pie y se haga contar ahora. Y aún tienes hasta mañana viernes a las 6 de la mañana para completar el censo por internet en el 2020census.gov.
So we are back with you on Bronx Talk. It's a very special night. It's unusual because we're doing it live and we're doing it virtually, so it provides challenges for people who don't know. This is the 26th anniversary of Bronx Talk, and what better way to celebrate that than with Hispanic Heritage Month and a celebration with, frankly, the largest voting bloc and the largest segment of Bronx population. 54% of the borough of the Bronx is Hispanic, and the whole concept was created and pushed forward by the new chair of the Bronx Democratic County Committee. So I'll let Senator Jamaal Bailey welcome the next group of elected officials that we have.
Well, Gary, once again, let me thank you and congratulate you on 26 amazing years of Bronx Talk. And you talk about the population, 54% Latino representation is incredibly important. But it all starts at home, and Latinos represent 75% of my household. So it's incumbent upon me to always ensure that I'm making sure that I'm doing things to represent properly for those of us in the Latino Latinx community. So with that being said, we have I'm honored to be the chair of such a great and diverse borough. And we have an amazing roster of elected officials, which in my opinion are matched by no borough. And leading off, that's our history-making Dominican-American Congress member, the first Dominican-American Congress member in the history of the United States Congress, Congressmember Adriano Espaillat. We have another dominating force in the greatest 80th Assembly District, as she called it. She's been great on the issues of criminal justice reform and mental health. She represents the same district as I do. It's great Southern woman, Natalia Fernandez. We have El Presidente, El Condado. We got to make sure we have to. I got to stop right in the middle because the president of the borough of the Bronx, the man who calls it God's country, somebody who mentioned me when I was a mere intern in the state assembly, our borough president Ruben Diaz has just joined us, and he'll put those X's up. I was getting ready to mention our great hybrid council member, but she might be part Bronx, part Manhattan, but she's all about her business. In the 8th Council District, Council Member Diana Ayala, from the West Side. He's a pastor, he's a leader, but most importantly, he's a dedicated family man. And Councilmember Fernando Cabrera, I was going to try to roll the R, but I'm not good at that. That's why I just said Cabrera. And last, but certainly not least, Bronx Science, SUNY Albany, sounds a lot like me. But he's in the 85th Assembly District. He's our Assembly nominee, and he's going to do great things in the New York State Assembly, Kenny Burgos. And I am really excited about the deep bench that we have in the borough of the Bronx. And God bless God's country.
There we go. I see the borough president came ready for action this evening for Hispanic Heritage Month. We'll just tell people who weren't with us for the first part of our program. We're going to move very quickly. We'll ask some fun questions and also some issues questions. Of course, all the elected officials and prospective elected officials are ready to do that. Let's start with the number one citizen in the Bronx. For our 26th anniversary, Mr. Borough President, nothing could be more appropriate than having you on. You are the most frequent guest we've ever had on our program in 26 years. I lost count, but I think we're up to number 31 tonight. So nice to have you with us, sir.
It's always a pleasure. I just thought that you would be hosting this in Spanish this evening.
Well, listen, it's a multicultural.
I want to hear Gary Axelbank speak Spanish.
¿Cómo está usted, señor?
There we go. Gary,
that means I paid attention in 8th grade, I promise you. Next time we're going to do Jewish Heritage Month and I'll have you speak Yiddish. That'll be pretty cool. Nonetheless, Mr. Borough President, what we did in the first part, we're going to do here. Obviously, you are from Puerto Rico. What's important to you about being Puerto Rican? Why is it real special? Why did you come here waving the flag, wearing the T-shirt, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, we have a rich history and we're proud. Number one, we are proud of our music. We're proud of our culture. We're proud of our diversity just in that small island of Borinquen. That heritage goes way back to the Arawak Indians, then the Arawak indigenous people, the Taino indigenous people. Then there's a mixture of people from all over the planet. And so we come in so many different hues and shapes and sizes. And, everything from our little idiosyncrasies. My grandmother, my abuelita, is no longer around. But everything from asking la bendición, which is asking for the blessing. Every time you see an elderly in your family, you say bendición, and they say que Dios te bendiga, which they're giving you that blessing back. To the little things like sleeping on a couch that's covered with plastic. Because the grandmother, your titi, never took off the plastic on the couch. To having the big cracker, aluminum cracker can filled with rice, not crackers. Filled with rice. And we don't have a measuring cup.
The plastics look cold in the winter and hot in the summer.
Yeah. And then so those green crackers that you eat with coffee, and when that was done, you had rice in there and you didn't have a measuring cup. We always have like a broken teacup. And that's the way you measure how much rice you put in and how much you cook them to the selflessness of the community. There's a saying in Spanish, donde come uno comen 100 y donde cabe uno cabe 100, meaning wherever one eats, 100 can eat. We know how to make $1 out of 15 cents. We know how to celebrate. We have a passion for music. We have a passion for hard work. We're respectable. We're people of faith. And for me, it's important to wave the flag because here in New York City, while I'm Bronx born and my parents are from Puerto Rico, with all of the diversity, with all of the history in this city, I'm always proud that the Puerto Rican community has put its staple in the history of this great city and this great country.
Great. So, Mr. Borough President, we've got to move on. We got a lot of time, but stick around because we'll do a little lightning round at the second part of the program. Let's go to Congressmember Adriano Espaillat. Let's talk about your heritage, your roots. I know you have a tremendous story. It's one of the most historic stories in Congress, where you were from and how you got to where you are right now. So where are you from?
Well, I'm from the Dominican Republic, from Santiago. But Ruben forgot the little dog with the head in the back of the car. I don't know, the little German Shepherd with the head. And then on the windows of the car, they had the little balls, right? You never saw that? That's old school right there. Well, I'm from the Dominican Republic, but I got here in the 60s. So, I grew up with a lot of Puerto Ricans and others. And there was even, like, I remember a very early Ecuadorian community here, and that's when I saw soccer and I said, what's this? I'm a baseball guy, but I got tuned into that. This is a great nation that allows and gives you the opportunity to come together with people from all over the world. And so I'm happy to represent the 13th district, which is really people from all over, Albanians, you have Vietnamese in the Bronx, you have Mexicans, Puerto Ricans, you have Soviet Jews, German Jews, you have Dominicans, Senegalese, African Americans, you got everybody in that district, and West Africans. It's just tremendous. And they
Congressman, let me jump in and just ask you a question. I'm presuming since you came from the Dominican Republic, your first language was Spanish. Was it difficult to learn English when you got here?
Yes, there wasn't, I'm not aging myself, but there wasn't no bilingual education back then. So I literally sat in the back of the classroom, and I think I told Ruben this story. The story is that on the first day, the teacher kept on saying also this and also that. The word also sounds like also, which is bear. So when I got home, my mother said, so how did it go on your first day of school? I said, the teacher kept on talking about this bear all day long.
There you go. Congressman, thank you very much. You also stick around. Let's say hello to the Assembly member in the 80th Assembly District, Natalia Fernandez. Let's talk about your heritage.
Hi. Well, I am Cuban and Colombian. I have a Colombian flag. My Cuban flag is in my car. And one thing that my Cuban family always did, just to talk about, family things, the new baby, every time there's a new baby in the family, they hang the baby shoes on the car there. So you always knew who was the favorite because the shoes are still there. But yeah, I'm Cuban and Colombian. My father came to the Bronx from Cuba. My mother came from Colombia to the Bronx. I'm sorry, I mixed it all up. But my heritage is, like everyone else, so rich and fun. My memories are always being in somebody's campo where there was a pig, where we got it live and then started roasting it right away, either in the cajachina or maybe we had a spit that we did. But one of my favorite things about my family is how we celebrate the food. We're always cooking, like I said, the pig, but the dance. My father could never dance, but he insisted that we had the music playing and make sure that we had fun. And growing up, that was something that I embraced: dancing, learning salsa, learning merengue, bachata, even now rumba and tango. Each area of dance has its history in different, cultures of the Hispanic culture. And it's really just lovely to be a part of. I love the spirit.
I want to take a moment and ask you the same question that I asked the congressman, because in the first part of our show, we found some fascinating answers to it. Your first language was English or Spanish? Are you fully bilingual? And was it difficult to learn both languages and go to school in both, knowing both languages?
Well, I did grow up in Rockland as a youngster, and fourth in line out of 6 kids, I did start fluently in Spanish. But in school, they told my parents, please practice English at home because we want them to learn. So I will admit that my English, kind of dominated my Spanish, and I still am very conversational now. Vocabulary could improve, but I kind of went from fluent to English to then lost to now better to now 50-50.
There you go. Thank you so much. Councilmember Ayala, nice to have you with us this evening. I saw you kind of nodding and giggling when you heard some of the cultural things that Hispanics have gone through. Talk about your own heritage and what's real special about that for you.
Well, I'll add that my mother was just as crazy as everybody else is. And so she has a tendency to take the empty butter jar and fill it up with sofrito. So whenever you're looking for butter and you open it, there's a whole bunch of sofrito waiting for you. It's really funny. The kids love it. But I'm a proud Puerto Rican, born in Puerto Rico. I was born in Rio Piedras, Puerto Rico, but my mother actually moved us to New York City when I was 5. So I'm a Puerto Rican that's still trying to identify with her roots, really learning about my own heritage, because I was born and raised, I was raised here, and didn't really get to know enough about, I think, the politics of Puerto Rico. Even some of the cultural norms were kind of lost on me. And I want to thank, Ruben and Marcos and Melissa Margarito, because I think if it wasn't because of my work through this office, I really wouldn't know as much as I know now. And now I'm kind of lamenting that I'm getting a little bit older, and I feel like I have to kind of catch up, because I feel like every time I go to Puerto Rico, it's very nostalgic for me, that I missed out on an opportunity to grow up there and to visit more often.
What do you bring from that heritage into the city council, into your office, that is useful for you when you work with your constituents and the people that you serve?
Well, I think that I have a deep-rooted understanding of what the needs of the Puerto Rican community is, of the Latino community in general. Many of us have a lot of things in common, both good and bad. So, I think I bring those experiences with me every single day. And I try to be the voice for the underrepresented. I always consider myself the underdog representing the underdog. Because there aren't that many Latinos left, and there are many Puerto Ricans left in political office. And so it's a very big responsibility to bear, but it's an important one.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Fernando Cabrera, nice to have you with us, sir.
To see you, Gary.
Let's talk a little bit about your heritage. Where are you from? And talk about the way you grew up and how that influenced how you grew up and got you to where you are.
Well, I was born right here in the boogie down Bronx, but my parents moved us when I was just 4 years old. I'm a twin, and my mom is Puerto Rican. My father is Dominican, which was something rather unusual back then in 1964 when I was born. And but we went to Puerto Rico, so I had talking about language, my first language was actually Spanish. So when I came back when I was 14, I went through the struggles. As a matter of fact, I didn't know what racism was until I came back to mainland United States. Being made fun of because of my accent, being, all those complex and insecurities that those who have come from other countries could relate to this story. And so it was challenging, but it helped me to find myself and to go back to Puerto Rico, whether it was during Hurricane Maria, to make a difference there after the earthquake, go to Dominican Republic and work in the rehab program that I work very closely with over there, and to go back to my roots and to give back. That's something that's really important to me. And by the way, I'm married to a Mexican, so my children are Mexicans. So I got the Latino United Nations going on.
Tremendous, we had it in the first part of our program and we're having it now. Tremendous lessons to learn and role modeling that especially young people in the Bronx can follow from all of the elected officials. And this next gentleman is a hopeful elected official. Let's say hello to Kenny Burgess, who's a nominee, Democratic nominee in the 79th Assembly District. So good luck in your campaign, sir. I know you're hopeful of achieving office, but let's talk about you and your heritage and your roots.
Good to see you, Gary. Thanks for having me again. Just quick note, it's the 85th Assembly, not the 70th.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries. I know these things are confusing. There's like 85 districts.
You're right.
But so I'm Puerto Rican and Ecuadorian. Was born and raised here in the Bronx, as were my parents. So I'm actually a second generation, Bronxite. My grandfather's from Guayaquil, Ecuador, and the majority of my other grandparents are from Puerto Rico, around the Florida area. So I grew up obviously in the same kind of Hispanic background as everyone here. I mean, I had the export sodas cans at the top. I had the shoes on the car. I remember growing up, asked my mother to teach me how to cook rice, and I said, how many cups do you put in to how much rice? She said, we don't count it. She told me the spoon trick, where you just put the spoon, and if the spoon stands up in the pot of rice, then that's enough water, and then you just let it cook. So that's kind of what I've learned from her.
It worked.
It does work.
It works. Well, here you all are. You've eaten well. Let's talk a little bit about what you see as most important if you do get elected to represent your district in the assembly. What's important for you to bring and help Hispanic people in the Bronx with?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, 54% of the Bronx identifies as Hispanic. The 85th Assembly District is even a larger proportion of Hispanics. So it's really going to be much like the city and much like the borough of the Bronx is coming out of COVID. It's really about reshaping our borough with this, I guess, if you want to say clean slate, but to be an economic powerhouse, to have the resources that we've always deserved and unfortunately have not always gotten. And really just taking the opportunity again to just rebuild and come back a much better and much stronger Bronx.
Thank you very much. We're going to have a little fun now. We've had fun already, but we're going to have a little more fun, and we'll do a little lightning round, and we'll go around essentially in the same order. So let's start with you, Mr. Borough President. Let's talk about who's the Hispanic figure that you most admire, that you would like to meet. Now, I know you've been around a long time and you've seen a lot of people, but what Hispanic figure do you most admire?
Wow.
Whoa. Do you want us to get back to you?
I mean, would like to meet. I met everybody from Herman Badillo to Adriano Espaillat to Sonia Sotomayor to Lin Manuel to everybody in between. So J-Lo, I met them all. So I admire all of them for their resiliency. To Rita Moreno, who's the matriarch of our community. So I've been blessed in that I've been able to meet the majority of the people in my community whose shoulders I stand on, and have gotten bits and pieces of their knowledge and their sagacity that has contributed to who I am today.
Thank you very much. Congressman, who do you most admire? Maybe some of you have, as the borough president, have met so many, but who do you most admire? And is there somebody that you'd like to get a chance to meet?
I'm a big baseball fan. So, and I met a bunch of Hall of Famers, Juan Marichal, of course, big Pedro Martinez. But I would have loved to have met Roberto Clemente. I think that that would have been a thrill for me because, I watched him play on TV, but, he was a complete ball player and obviously a great human being. There's a Roberto Clemente Award, Major League Baseball, that's given to the player that gives back the most to a portion of society. I would have loved to have met him. I actually, when I met Juan Marichal, who they're part of the same generation, I spent like a whole day with Juan Marichal, and he spoke a lot about Roberto Clemente and how he mentored, a lot of the players back then, and because he was an Afro-Latino, and so was Marichal, and a lot of the players back then, they were also subjected to double discrimination. And so he told me a bunch of stories about the South and what happened to them when they went down there to play. But I would have loved to meet Roberto Clemente.
I just have a very softball follow-up. It's easy question to ask you. You think number 21 should be retired across?
Oh, I have a resolution in Congress asking for that. Absolutely. Absolutely. No question about it.
Somehow I knew that was going to be your answer. Assemblywoman Fernandez, for you, somebody who you admire most? You have to just unmute yourself there if you would.
Growing up, it was Celia Cruz, our Cuban queen, loving her music. And my parents did get to meet her once upon a time in Victor's Cafe, the famous Cuban restaurant in Manhattan there. But now, being an adult, being in this career, I would love to meet Justice Sonia Sotomayor. Not only does she have, my mother's name, Doña Sonia, but she really is an inspiration for everything she's achieved as a Bronx woman, as a Latina, making it to the highest level of the court. Like I would love to sit with her and just hear her journey and, learn from her, hopefully mimic a lot of the things that she has done, but she is one of my top.
Needless to say, that is a very contemporary thought and a very contemporary issue. All you have to do is open any newspaper today and
so to talk to her
understand
right
why.
I would love to hear from her.
Councilmember Ayala, for you.
I agree with Natalia. I think Justice Sotomayor, but I think I've always been fascinated by Walter Mercado, who passed away last year. Well, we were actually coincidentally in Puerto Rico. My favorite of all time, grew up watching him. He was a Puerto Rican astrologer, synonymous in the LGBTQ community, and just loved him.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Cabrera.
I'm going to cheat a little bit here. My hero is not somebody I wanted me, somebody I already know. It's actually my pastor. They made a movie out of him. It was the #1 movie in Puerto Rico. It's called Victor. It's on Netflix for anybody who wants to watch it. He Puerto Rican, 1950s. He was in gangs. He was a heroin addict. got touched. But he did something amazing. He came back. He started a rehab program, and over 20,000 men and women, young men and young women have changed their lives. It's called New Life for Youth, the program.
We've got to move on because now we're coming to the end of the show. Thank you so much, Kenny Burgos.
Yeah, I'll be brief. To be quite honest, I had the same answer as Diana and Natalia. Really, Justice Sonia Sotomayor would be the role model for me.
There you go. Chairman Jamaal Bailey will give you the final word, and then we got to wrap it up. So just take 15 seconds and let's do it quick.
Just thank you. I would also echo the sentiments of Congressman Espaillat. Roberto Clemente has been a personal hero of mine, not just because he had the best arm in the business, 3,000, but because he was a civil rights icon. He did a lot more than people give him credit for, so let's look it up. If I could have one more moment with my great late mother-in-law, Grisel Vasquez, I would. She passed away this March because of COVID, and she was an inspiration to me and my family. So may she rest in peace.
Thank you all for helping us on BronxNet celebrate our 26th anniversary of BronxTalk. Thanks to Michael Max. Thanks to all the great producers who worked on it. Thanks to our elected officials. We are all inspired tonight to build a better Bronx. I think we're finding out more and more about our people every day, and it's a beautiful thing. Thank you, one and all. And we'll see you. Have at it. Go ahead. Yeah. Celebrate.
Love the flag.
Good night.
Un mensaje urgente para informarle que la administración de Trump acaba de acortar la fecha límite para el censo a hoy, el 15 de octubre. No responder al census podría afectar miles de millones de dólares en fondos para su comunidad. Usted podría perder a su representante en el Congreso debido a un conteo bajo. Tienes hasta esta noche, el 15 de octubre, para completar el censo por correo, por teléfono o en línea. Recuerde, el censo no pregunta sobre su ciudadanía. Es importante que se ponga de pie y se haga contar ahora. Y aún tienes hasta mañana viernes a las 6 de la mañana para completar el censo por internet en el 2020census.gov. Escucha Bronx. El día de las elecciones es el martes 3 de noviembre. ¿Irás de forma segura a las urnas para votar en persona? ¿O estarás votando en ausencia, enviando tu boleta por correo? Nueva York ofrece boletas de voto en ausencia por correo a los votantes que no podrán votar en persona por cualquier motivo. La votación en ausencia es confusa, pero es segura y se ha vuelto más común durante el coronavirus, debido a los temores de aglomeración en los sitios de votación. En las elecciones primarias, más de 500,000 boletas fueron rechazadas y descartadas debido a errores humanos. Entonces, antes de comenzar a llenar su boleta, asegúrese de tener en cuenta lo siguiente. Rellene el círculo completo. Nunca marque ninguna X o marca de verificación en lugar de llenar. No olvide firmar su nombre en el reverso de la boleta. Finalmente, envíe su boleta de voto ausente por correo antes de la fecha límite, el 3 de noviembre. También puede entregarlo en persona en un sitio de votación anticipada entre el 24 de octubre y el 1 de noviembre, en un sitio de votación el 3 de noviembre a las 9 p.m. o en la oficina de la Junta de Elecciones del Condado del Bronx a más tardar del 3 de noviembre a las 9 p.m. Manténgase informado, manténgase seguro, asegúrese de enviar su boleta de voto en ausencia o usar una máscara, permanecer a 6 pies de distancia y dirigirse con seguridad a las urnas para que se escuche su voz y su voto. Election Day is Tuesday, November 3rd. Remember, we're not just voting for president, we're also voting for local representation here in the Bronx. Vote411.org/ballot is a great resource to find out what other races are happening and who is running to represent your community. Simply enter your address, then click Show My Races. You will see a sample ballot displaying the presidential race and other local races taking place in your district. Early voting starts between October 24th to November 1st, and absentee ballots are due no later than November 3rd.